Hi, all of you sitting out there looking at us, and welcome to our webcast, our 8th webcast. And this time we have a guest. Hello, Martin. Welcome.
Hi, nice
to our studio.
Yes.
Good to see you again. And welcome, Mats. Thank you, as usual.
Thank you, Janne.
Thank you for coming. You're usually here, though. This time we'll focus on a few questions that we believe that shareholders are very interested in discussing and listening to what Martin has to say. So I'll give up my mic. I won't give because you've got other mics to you and Mats. And you take over from here, because what I will do is just try to figure out how to move the angles of the cameras and listen so that what you say is understandable mostly for the audience here. And so go ahead.
Okay. So we'll just jump straight into this, and these are the 4 topics that we want to explore today. We're going to ask a few questions about the financing structure and why you chose it, and then we're going to focus on business development, upcoming triggers, and why you are so enthusiastic about Fc-gamma-RIIb as a target. Mm-hmm. So, jumping straight into the financing structure, quite a lot of shareholders were surprised that it turned into a rights issue and the size of it. So, in your own words, just please describe the background and why you specifically chose to do this kind of size, mm-hmm. why a smaller one wouldn't do, why it became a rights issue, and why you think this is good for shareholders.
Mm-hmm. Happy to do so. So obviously we started to really focus on a directed issue first. So we basically, when I joined, don't forget that in September, directly in October, November, December, I went on an extensive roadshow in the US, in Israel, and in Europe. So we met, I think, 70 plus investors.
Wow.
And I think the feedback that we have gotten was very, very good. But obviously the timing was not ideal. Because from my perspective, I think it was a long time that the company has done such a comprehensive roadshow, if they ever have done so at all. And I was actually quite encouraged by the feedback, because a lot of large institutions focused on life science have been very, very positive, looking at the 3 areas that you can use for commercialization in the company, which is the platform, the portfolio, but also the manufacturing. But I think it was too short in order to get the money in place that we need in order to basically execute on our plans, in order to generate further value.
Mm. No, I could see that happening. And I think perhaps a comment on my own is that, I mean, you did have a bit of a bad timing, because when you hit the road in October, November, there was a pretty big scare in the markets.
Correct.
I mean, the biotech index was down, I think, 20%, something like that. And, you know, things were looking kind of iffy. So now there's a much more positive climate in the market. Mm-hmm. But, you know, that may not, you know, help for your purposes in this case. So directed issue was the first option, but you didn't really manage to get that in place. Yeah. So what about the size? I mean, last year you did a 100 million issue. Yeah. Now you went almost up to 300. So shareholders were maybe not quite ready for that. Mm-hmm. So why do you think this is necessary, and why is it actually good for shareholders instead of doing a smaller one?
Yeah, I think it's good because it gives some security that the company can really execute on the plans. And I think if you just do the small steps, it will generate a lot of insecurity, not only for the shareholders, but also for the company as such. And I think for the mid to long-term value building, because that's what we are looking here at, not short-term, I think it will pay off. And I think also the roadshow that we have done, the 70 plus meetings that we had, will also pay off in the long term.
Okay. All right, so we will jump ahead to the really interesting stuff. Thank you for that. I think there's a lot of people who, wanted to hear those answers. So going into business development, because you have your assets, we certainly here believe those are great assets, but you need to convert them into value. So in your own words, what's your current thinking on out-licensing your current project? Mm-hmm.
Before I come to out-licensing, so first a couple of words in general. So business development is my passion, basically, because at the end, I'm a scientist by training, but I think I always was looking into applying science. So that means generating some product, whether it's a technology or a therapeutic product or a diagnostic product that you can commercialize. So that's really something which is motivating to me. It's my driver, basically. And then, obviously, when you look at the company, you have 3 areas where you can commercialize. So you just mentioned one, the project portfolio, which is probably the biggest value driver, absolutely. But then you have the fully integrated discovery platform, which is also a very significant value driver. And when I did my meetings, because now, since September until basically beginning of this year, I was mainly focusing on financing. You know, meeting 70+ companies takes some time. But in between, I did some BD events as well. So I went 2 times to Japan. The reason why I went there, I'm very well connected with the Japanese market. And there's quite some interest in our portfolio as well as in our technology platform. And then just last week, I was in Vienna on BioEurope Spring, where I had 35 meetings in 3 days. And, I would say 2/3 were corporates, 1/3 large pharma, and another third small to mid-sized companies. And there's a significant interest, again, both in the portfolio and the platform. So you can do partnering around the platform. So we have the Pfizer deal, which is ongoing, and Pfizer is very happy. I met them there as well. And I think you could do, or you could envision that you do another Pfizer type of deal around the platform. Then obviously the portfolio, where you can look at individual projects. 1206 obviously is the lead runner. I think based on the feedback that I have received, there's a lot of interest, but people would like to see probably some early stage of clinical proof of concept. That's at least the feedback that I have currently from the market. But then I also went through the earlier stage programs in the portfolio. And my feedback from the market was that there might be also interest in earlier pre-IND, that means preclinical assets, provided the data package is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, your idea of fun is to live in hotels and meet a lot of companies. I understand that. That's great. That's really good for shareholders. And what would your current focus be? What's the sort of most common theme when you meet these companies? A specific project or introducing Bioinvent, or how are you actually sort of going to get that pile of cash?
So it's twofold, in brackets threefold. Twofold in that sense, it's always the technology platform plus the portfolio, because in a way they're also related, because we use the platform to generate the portfolio. So it would validate each other, obviously. And some companies will be more focused on the platform, others will be more focused on the platform, on the portfolio, and then also on specific projects. And third, and this is more on the side, is also manufacturing. So maybe just one sentence around that. I think the main importance for the company to have manufacturing is really to transition quickly from preclinical into clinical. And I made the calculations when I joined the company. It's actually much cheaper to have it in-house than to outsource it, because then you have to go to CMOs, you have to reserve slots, pay money for that, etc., etc. So you pay through your nose, basically, in order to do manufacturing. If you have to shift timelines, then the money is gone that you have used for your reservation, just to give you an example. So I think that's the main importance, or the strategic importance for the company, to have manufacturing. But saying so, we don't use all the slots, which means we will always have the ambition to fill them with external parties. Okay. But coming back to the focus, it's clearly the portfolio and the platform, twofold. Yeah.
So we're going to give you the opportunity to choose a couple of dream partners for 1808 and 1206.
Well, dream partners would be, of course, I cannot mention specific names. So I think...
You can.
Yeah, I can mention the usual ones, right? And then you can pick yourself. But what I can say is what the strategy is. So I'm exploring a twofold strategy there for the portfolio. One is regional deals. So I mentioned already Japan. I will also explore China, because I think there's a lot of opportunities there. But I have to build my network there, and I will use probably somebody helping me there in China. Whereas in Japan, I already have a network, so I can just tap into that. And those will be regional deals. Saying so, a lot of Asian companies, Japanese as well as Chinese, are also now looking broader. That's also a very new trend, especially in Japan, because before it was Japan only. And now I met a couple of companies and said, well, it's at least this, maybe Asia plus, maybe even worldwide. Yeah, and then China is the same thing. At the beginning it was China only, then Asia, and then worldwide. The reason for that, obviously, they initially they could earn a lot of money locally. They're not able to do that anymore, so they have to go out, which is good for companies such as us, because as I see Bioinvent is an engine which can generate those opportunities, and then you just partner them at the right time with the right partner, whether it's preclinical or whether it's early clinical. But the current strategy is really not that we move all the way through the process chain. We might do that at some time point later. Now I'm really focusing on building a portfolio and then having partnering activities around that portfolio and the platform.
So what you're saying is that there's sufficient money in Asia to actually even look at Asian companies for worldwide rights?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Not for all the companies, but for I would say maybe 1/3 of the companies there, because the smaller.
Sure.
But the companies which are really thriving and pushing, and that could be even mid-sized companies, they also look at worldwide rights. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I guess the important thing is to get a lot of competition for your assets.
Correct.
So it's encouraging to hear that you can speak to more parties than just the sort of European major pharmas and biotechs, because if you throw in a couple of Japanese companies, the more at the table, the better you will get paid in the end.
And that's also my approach. So as you said at the beginning jokingly, so it's basically cranking the wheel. So you have to meet as many as you can, making sure that the story is out there, keeping them updated such that by the time you have certain data, that you don't have to introduce yourself and the company. So most of the companies know me since I'm doing business development since probably, 15 years, maybe even 20 years. So they know my face, but now I have to introduce Bioinvent again, the new Bioinvent, with the platform, not only generating antibodies, but also targets, plus having an interesting portfolio, early stage still, but maturing nicely in the field of cancer immunotherapeutics.
All right, so we're going to show you a couple of things, and it's important to stress to all of you out there that this has nothing to do with the company. This is me and Janne, and Martin is not responsible for these figures. So now you know that. But the top 3 here is where we see sort of, maybe the top 3 here, that's basically, they're generated with the platform, but this is how you're going to make the money, and this is basically where most, not all, but the vast majority of the value of the company is in these top 3 things. So right now, these are not in sort of any specific order, but we're looking at 1808, a deal in the 12 months starting mid this year with a $20 to $40 million upfront and or equity. So, it could be 10 million upfront, 30 million equity or something like that. 1206, deal after the top line data, 75 to 100 million upfront or equity. And Transgen, you've been speaking a little bit about that. So we have a bigger range here from mid of next year and 2 years ahead. But we think that this could be sort of a fairly valuable project. So, when we look at this, I think, 1808, obviously today, I would say it has zero value in the company today. Looking at the share price, 1808 is worth zero. But we think it's worth something. So, having seen this, are we mad?
I wouldn't say you are mad, but I have to correct a little bit. Yeah?
Sure, go ahead.
So at least I'll give you my perspective, let's put it that way. So first of all, I think I would change the order a little bit. Maybe just one comment to 1808 first. Obviously, the value is zero for the shareholders because it has been under the radar all the time.
Absolutely.
So now we came out, I think it was last week, basically announcing that we have this program around TNF receptor 2. And I think it's very interesting because it came out of the functional screening with first onto regulatory cell. And this target came up again and again and again. And now we have a nice panel of antibodies. And 1808 obviously is the lead. What I can tell you regarding 1808, so presented it, of course, then also during the BioEurope Spring. And there were a couple of companies quite interested to look at the data package that we have. That's the only thing that I can say currently. So obviously, if we go maybe in a different order, so I would start with 1206 because that's the most advanced. I think if I would be that bold to say, if we have good clinical data, there should be a deal doable. Absolutely. I really believe that, if the data is good. And I think the range that you put there, so I would be a little bit more careful. So it could be something between 10 to 100 million upfront, in that range. Obviously, again, this depends then entirely on the data package and on the receiving part, what the needs are. But I think there's definitely interest. But I think for that program, probably would need clinical proof of concept, because now we're in the clinic, because that's also something important to understand. Once you're in the clinic, all corporations will say, okay, fine. It's very interesting, but finish and give me the data, right? Sure. So that's why it's so interesting with 1808, just flipping back to that one. We're not in the clinic yet. Yeah, so you could really finalize the so-called pre-IND package.
So there's no, deadline coming up for
exactly,
data
because
coming
otherwise
up.
Everybody would say, and that's the nice thing when you have a portfolio, because then you have at different stages, different programs, kind of serving different appetites. Because there might be companies more interested in earlier stage, that means preclinical, yeah, because then they can do their clinical themselves, and others, they like, a lot of Japanese companies still, they're quite conservative. They would like to see a proof of concept in man. Yeah? So I think that's a good thing of having a portfolio, that you have different things to offer. Yeah, and it's also, for me, makes my business development activities much easier than just having one or focusing on one. And for the company, you have a risk mitigation strategy, because not everything will work, right? So you need to have some things to play with. So coming then to the next one in line, I would actually say, okay, could be then 1607, because that's the third program around Fc gamma R2b, and we come back to the target later. And of course, there's one in between where we didn't give the name yet, and we can discuss it maybe later when we talk about Fc gamma R2b, why this is the case. But I think those are probably the first ones in line. Saying so, 1808 generated some excitement with cooperation.
And we should probably also point out here, because we didn't know this, but you actually commented on, this is the platform, and it seems that, you actually said out loud that, we may do another Pfizer type deal.
Yes.
And I don't think, people have had that sort of goal in mind, so that's positive to hear. We have to move on, because there's a lot of interesting things to talk about, but I want to ask you this. You know a lot about 1808, for instance. You have data on the target, you have the animal tumor models, you have this great panel of antibodies that work in different ways. We don't know a lot about this, but you do. So, what do you think? What's the likelihood that nobody would want this? Because, there's no risk in getting the data. You have the data.
Yeah. So then still the data has to be interesting enough for the receiving party. Absolutely. So the data is there. So from our perspective, or from the company's perspective, we're ready to move that into the clinic, which means it has been validated, at least the lead compound 1808. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, in your mind, this is valuable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It has value. No doubt. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no doubt. The market says no.
Yes, but that's why it was under the radar. And of course, you have to keep things under the radar, because you do a lot of preclinical work. A lot of stuff is not working at all. And if you would come out early, you do one experiment, you think it's very positive, you get out, and then maybe after a couple of months you say, well, we did a second one and didn't support. So that's why you have to be careful, because preclinical work is mainly scientific work, basically. Right?
Okay, so we're going to move into this, which is important. So here on the left, of course, you have the triggers that are in your presentation. This is obviously stolen from your presentation on the left. And we've added quite a bit more that we think that you'll be able to do something with. And we're just going to actually start to draw this in here. And obviously, we expect at some point some, preclinical data on your anti-Fc gamma R2b and a PD-1 combination. And we're going to go out and say that since you have to move this into the clinic at some point, you're going to sort of have to come out with that. We're going to sort of say that maybe an 1808 deal comes. We know that you can't give, milestones about deals. We realize that. But like you said, you expect it to happen at some point. So, and now we have the top line data coming out in H1. So for 1206, we're going to draw that down there. And first deal, we have no idea. Let's say that you do that here, but that obviously, we haven't spoken a lot about it, and we sort of are not going to put so much focus on TB403 here. But I mean, obviously there's going to be data on that program at some point, and I'm just going to go with Oxorian here. They said it should be coming out at the end of the year. You have an ASH conference at the end of the year, and we expect you to actually do something there. Maybe it's just an update on the combination 1206 rituximab, but that's towards the end of the year. And then this one, these are some public stuff. It's been out on the forum. I mean, Mitsubishi are moving into phase 2. It's on clinical trials, and it's known that this is from you. So you should be looking at the Mitsubishi milestone once they start, I guess, recruiting. So that should be right here. And then, of course, the Transgen deal at some point, if you choose to out-license it, is more difficult to put in. So I'm going to put that here. So, so in H2 2020. So this is just to sort of get a feel from, I mean, these are what you are, confident on will happen and when it will happen. And we just want to sort of direct people's attention to the fact that there's a lot of really important stuff that's going to be happening in the company. But since you can't say exactly when, you can't put it into your trigger table.
No, you can't.
So, I mean, out of these, we are talking, 8 potential triggers here in, the next 18 months or 24 months, potentially that's in there. And, I mean, are we wrong here? Is there, a lot of this stuff that's not going to happen, do you think?
I'm going through this sequentially. First, maybe a comment regarding the milestone triggers. You're right. Those are the ones that we are most confident with. Obviously, still, this is clinical work. So it's also not guaranteed. But just to make make it clear to everybody. And obviously, and that's just conservative and good practice. You don't put any deals. The only thing that I can say is, and you can hear from my activities, what I'm doing, I will have a lot of focus. So that will be my primary focus, deal making going forward, or it has become. And maybe I can just go through this one by one. So the anti-FC, this is the second one, right? That you're referring to, PD-1 data. So hopefully, and that's still the current planning, we'll start clinical development or initiate clinical development at some time point, first half of this year. And then obviously we should have, as outlined also in my milestones, since it will be open label, have some data at some time point next year. And then it depends on the data, obviously, right? So what you get. But that could be a potential project for out-licensing partnering. 1808 we discussed. The only thing I can tell you here is significant interest in the program as such, because TNF receptor 2 is a known target, but not that much used in the context of immunotherapy in cancer, which was raising a couple of eyebrows when we presented it in a positive sense, such that we really have antibodies there that seem to do an interesting job, and people are really keen to see the preclinical data. And maybe we're lucky that somebody said, "Oh, this is really conducive. Let's start discussing." So maybe with 1808 we are even required to go into the clinic. We'll see. 1206 I mentioned already earlier, so that's really dependent on proof of concept data. First, something that I'm always, when I do my business development activities discussions, that I try to market in addition, because it goes hand in hand. With the platform we generate those projects. So I always try to entice people also to look at that, and there might be the potential for that. 403, I don't want to say too much at this time point. You can see when you go into my presentation, it's not part of our core portfolio. More I can't say at the moment. No. So stay tuned. That's the only thing I can say. Yes, obviously, ASH, we want to present something, and you know already that we will come out with the first data regarding the 1206 by summer. So we applied for a poster presentation at that meeting, which will be the first release of data. Yeah, so that's something I think which is also quite important. Mitsubishi, yeah, everybody knows they are initiating phase 2 clinical trials. We can't push them. They do that at their pace. Will come, basically.
Yeah.
So,
but if you didn't expect a milestone, you wouldn't have made that comment. So
yes, exactly. Transgene, I think, is a very interesting collaboration. As you know, so our focus mainly is to work with naked antibodies, but with Transgene, we have the possibility to combine that with their oncolytic virus platform. The preclinical data that we have for the first program, CTLA-4, looks very promising. And the current plan is to have that ready for some time point. And I know there's a discrepancy between Transgene's communication and ours. But I'm tending to be more conservative. So I would say at some time point next year, we'll go into the clinic or is ready for the clinic. It's a 50-50 collaboration. And I think the press release that we had also roughly a week ago is very important because we will have other combinations of their oncolytic virus with our antibodies. So that collaboration in itself could generate a very interesting portfolio. And again, to take away the anxiety, it's not that we want to put all this into the clinic, but maybe in some cases, and probably for this combination, we have to show some proof of concept in the clinic, I believe, because it's very new, it's cutting edge, it's really the forefront. But you don't have to go through all the way. So if you show promising clinical data and then safety, that's what people are interested there in this context. I think you do partnering around that.
And I would guess that, I mean, a lot of people would probably want to see, and maybe that's at SITC here towards the end of the year, because I mean, I also know you got the question from American investors at the KOL event, is that, I mean, when you can show that you have enough antibody in the tumor, with preclinical data, I think that's going to be sort of a big wow in a way, right? Because they have showed some interesting data Transgene with PD-1 antibodies, but they haven't shown specifically that you get CTLA-4. But I think you actually have that data because, I mean, you seem positive, so I think you've done those tests. I just think that data is not sort of public yet. So I'm certainly.
And of course, we have to coordinate with Transgene, obviously, since they're a 50% partner in that endeavor. But obviously, and you can see from their communication, they're even more aggressive when they want to put this into the clinic. So that means we have good preclinical data. Otherwise, wouldn't contemplate to go into the clinic.
Yeah,
and at the right time, we will then publish and show.
Okay, so moving on. You are weeks or months from going into humans with a combination of Fc gamma R2b, anti-Fc gamma R2b a blocker, I would think it is, in combination with the biggest drugs that are currently out there, the PD-1 blockers. And you haven't really sort of shown people a lot of the sort of rationale behind this. So we're going to ask you to, in your own words, so the viewers understand, why do you think this will work and what do you want to achieve with this trial? For like, I mean, do you want non-responders to become responders? Do you want a deeper effect? I mean, what do you want to achieve and why is this so valuable? And in your own words.
Yeah, so it's both. Just to piggyback on your last sentence, so it's both. You want to enhance and you want to make responders or non-responders, turn them into responders again. And maybe I have to explain a little bit more because the Fc gamma R2b story is quite complicated, I think.
Just fix this. Straight in. So,
okay, thank you very much. So the simplest way to explain that, and I try to be as simple as possible. So obviously everybody knows the checkpoint inhibitors or checkpoints. And the ones that are now used as therapeutic compounds is antibodies or inhibitors of PD-1, PD-L1, CTLA-4. And they're all expressed on T cells. So that's the adaptive arm of the immune system. Because if you look at the immune system, you have two arms. And what is being targeted with this approach, immunotherapy, is the adaptive arm only. Nobody is dealing with the innate immune arm, although this is a much older part of the immune system.
We're going to just show a picture. This is from the Arlaucas thing. I want this picture on my wall. Basically here what we see are macrophages, which are part of the innate immune system, like you said. And these macrophages in this case are actually well, you can say eating the labeled PD-1 inhibitor antibodies from the effector cells, which is part of the adaptive immune system. So this, you could say, is a reason why it may not work. And this could be a rationale for actually, you know, blocking Fc gamma R2b receptors. But I don't know whether this is your rationale or not.
Yeah. I can even explain it even more simpler. So what you need to get a good immune response, you need both. You need the adaptive arm and the innate arm. So both has to be active. And if you then go back from the T-cell checkpoints and you go to the checkpoints of the, we call them antibody checkpoints, and there was just recently a very interesting review article published by us, basically, so Bioinventägargruppen and his team. Those are checkpoints which are expressed on dendritic cells, so which are part of the innate immune system. And there you just have, again, two flavors, like the T-cell checkpoints. You have inhibitory and activating checkpoints. And you have, when you look at the checkpoints of the innate immune system, you have 3 activating, and there's only 1 inhibitory. Whereas if you look at the T-cell checkpoints, you have at least 10, I think, inhibitory. And PD-1, CTLA-4, this is just 2 of a number, a bunch. Whereas Fc gamma R2b is the only inhibitory one, which is known today. Of course, you never know, maybe there's others, but we believe there's only 1. And that one is quite crucial because if you think about antibody-based therapies, antibodies with their Fc part interact with Fc gamma R2b. And by this, you have an inhibitory signal to the innate immune system, which we are taking away by blocking it.
But the current PD-1 inhibitors are designed as IgG4 antibodies not to have this interaction.
But still, you might have interactions. Yeah. And of course, it's always good to block the inhibitory signal provider, let's put it that way, in order to make sure that the innate arm is active. Yeah? And then we can just say from the preclinical data that we have generated that we see very strong effects, both what you said, enhancing, as well as turning non-responders into responders.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And this data, I mean, I've been at you for 6 months wanting to see it. So is it in fact going to be made public?
It will be at some time point. So this field of checkpoints and combinations is quite competitive. And what I want to give the company is really the opportunity to file IP until the last minute, such that our portfolio becomes as strong as possible. Of course, we have already IP, but we are in the process to generate even more IP, patents, basically, for people who don't know IP, intellectual property. And that's the reason why we will keep it until the last minute, probably until we really go into the clinic, when it has to be disclosed what it is, because then it will be somewhere
it
readable.
Will be in the protocol and stuff.
And then it will be available. But that's the honest and true reason, and that we would do with all the projects that we have, keep them as long hidden as long as possible, to make sure, because for me, partnering, that's important.
I understand. And
if I don't have strong patents and IP that I can show to potential partners, they would say, well, it's very interesting data, but that's science. You can publish it, but we want to make a product.
Yeah, I understand. So, but you're also being quite clear on the fact that once you actually go into the clinic, which probably in this case means opening up centers for recruitment, right?
Yeah.
So you've spread this data around, then it's not a patent issue anymore, and then you can, in fact, communicate it.
Yeah, so basically, we'll, once again, so I keep it close to our chest or to my chest as long as we can. And whether that will be at that time point, when you say when we're opening centers or when we file an IND, that depends. Yeah. So I really want to give us as much time as possible in order to get as strong as possible IP.
Yeah. Because when you file the IND, that's sort of public almost, is it?
Yeah, you file it and then it will go into a database. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure because I'm not a clinical regulator, obviously.
No, but that's fine. I checked yesterday. Yeah. It's between filing the IND and actually being able to open the study, it's only 30 days. So, I mean, from the market's perspective, it's not like years or something like that.
But for the market, I can say we wouldn't go into the clinic if we don't have strong preclinical data. No. That's clear.
I respect that. Yeah. Thank you. So we're looking forward to that. Do we? Martin has to go into a meeting, so we have a hard stop. We have a few minutes. We've been trying to save those minutes because we have some questions from you in the group. So a short one, and we'll just jump straight at them. And we have 3 questions actually. And the first one is, are you going to buy shares in the company?
Yes, absolutely.
And that will, I guess, be disclosed when it's...
So we'll be part of the rights issue, basically. Just also to give a little bit background here. So I understand that in Sweden, everybody invests into shares. So I'm originally from Germany. There's a minority doing that. So I'm not an investor. And this will be my first biotech investment. And I'm in the biotech industry since 20 plus years, just to give you a little bit of context also from my perspective. Yeah.
Okay. But the second question, I think, is a very good one. What are you planning to do in order to keep the guarantors happy with keeping their shares after the rights issue, if they get any? We hope they won't, but it looks like they will. So how are you going to keep these people aboard?
Basically, talking to them. So that's also why I'm here today, to make sure that everybody understands the strategy and the mission that I'm on, basically. And I'm doing actually now, I think today and tomorrow we'll meet some of them, I believe, here in Stockholm. And then, of course, I keep with them in close contact, as I will try to do also with the other shareholders, to make sure that they understand where we are and how we move ahead, like business development, basically. So, you will reach out to the corporations to explain them what you're doing and then keep contact in order to keep them happy, and hopefully they will do it.
And there's just a follow-up question for me, which is sort of, the 70 institutions you met, could they still turn out
absolutely.
in this transaction?
They could turn out in this transaction, or maybe at a later time when the company needs another capital injection. So I think the work that we have done is not for nothing, because the feedback that we actually received is quite good. But as you said, and we said at the beginning, so I think the company has not been out there for quite some time. And of course, that's not how it works. So you have to introduce the company, they have to get comfortable with the strategy, they have to get comfortable with the team. And I think that we have done, and we keep that communication also ongoing. Absolutely.
Yeah, and with sort of data from the combination study coming out this summer, and the preclinical data from the combination with PD-1s coming out also by the summer latest, I hope. You're going to have a lot to talk about to update them.
Yeah.
And this is interesting. We haven't spoken to this, but we got a question from a member in the group. What happened to the CR-UK B1206 clinical trial?
Well,
there's sort of not a lot. Has it disappeared?
No, it's still ongoing. The reason why we don't talk much about it, because Bioinvent is not the sponsor. So it's Cancer Research UK. It's their study. Of course, we have a collaboration agreement and everything. So it's still ongoing, and they recruit, etc., etc. I can't give you from the top of my head the recruitment rate that they have. Obviously, it's slow, but that's typical for an organization such as Cancer Research UK, because they're more academic in that sense. So they're not pressured like we come out with our key milestones and milestones plan and news flow, etc., etc. They don't do that. So they basically go ahead as they feel comfortable, or as it just works, basically.
Do you know, are they into the combination stage yet? Or
no, they're still, I think they want to, the latest information, and I have to think a little bit, because of course there's a lot of confidential information between the two organizations. So the focus is still on single agent, but they also might look into combinations.
Okay. So I think we're going to have to let you go into your taxi, Martin. And Janne, do you have any follow-ups? Did we talk in a way that you could understand?
You did this perfectly well. Thanks a lot, both of you.
Yes.
And it's been very entertaining and very informative, I must say. And I hope you all, there's so many cameras around here. I hope you all enjoyed this and that you learned something from this. And we'll be back very soon with a commentary on what happened and what was said, and after this,
and a short
which
summary,
we will
perhaps.
do.
Yeah. So for those of you who can't watch it all, there's going to be a short summary somewhere on the page, I think, as well.
Very
so, thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Good luck with the rest of the
Thank
transaction.
You.